Welcome to Raise the Line with Osmosis from Elsevier, seeking solutions with leading experts on how to increase healthcare capacity so people can get the care they need during the pandemic and beyond.
Hi, I'm Shiv Gaglani, and today I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Alaa Hamed to Raise the Line as we continue our focus on rare diseases. Dr. Hamed is Global Head of Medical Affairs for Rare Diseases at Sanofi, one of the leading pharmaceutical companies in the world. In the rare disease space, Sanofi is most well known for its focus on lysosomal storage disorders, a group of conditions caused by enzyme deficiencies, including Gaucher disease, Fabry disease, Pompe disease, acid sphingomyelinase deficiency, or ASMD, and mucopolysaccharidosis type 1. I'm really looking forward to learning more about Dr. Hamed's work in rare diseases and what progress Sanofi is making in its many research efforts. So, Dr. Hamed, thanks for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you, Chef, for the invite. Appreciate to be here.
So we always like to ask our guests the first question, which is, can you tell us a bit about your background? What got you interested in the field of medicine and then eventually joining Sanofi some years ago?
So I'm not sure where to start, but I'll start by birth. So I'm Egyptian by birth. I was raised in Kuwait and I came to the US about 25 years ago. I finished my med school in Egypt and then moved to Boston University upon arrival in the US. Been with the company for over 10 or about 12 years now, primarily focused on rare diseases over that period of time. How my interest started in rare disease, I would say since a very young age, I was interested in the human aspect of life in general. I was hoping to become a writer. And that kind of led me to medicine to begin with, because every patient is a story. And through my evolving career journey, I ended up with the most personal of all specialization, which is the rare disease, where truly every patient is a story, and we interact on a daily basis with patients that inspire us and compel us to keep moving mountains for them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's something we've been honored to be able to profile many patient and family member stories. So we're coming up on the 40th anniversary of the Orphan Drug Act, and that's partly why we're so focused on the rare disease landscape. For our listeners who may not be as familiar with the landscape, how would you describe the current state of the global rare ecosystem and some of the major challenges for developing therapies for rare diseases?
I would say it has evolved over the past 30 years. So we developed our first drug, Ceradase, about 30 years ago, and it was the filing study was in 12 patients. And that's how we got our approvals, single-arm 12 patients study. Moving 30 years down the line, one of our development programs in Pompe, so the phase 3 study is over about 100 patient randomized control study. So you could see over 30 years the level of evidence and the challenge in generating evidence became more and more complex. But I would say also, the incentives that were set in place at the beginning truly accelerated innovations to patient, and we need to protect those incentives as the landscape evolve, because there are very few stakeholders or industry partners in the patient community that are able to bring therapies to market and continue to bring therapies to market. So keeping those incentive structure in place is really important.
No, absolutely. And that's including the production of new therapies, or the R&D that funds these new therapies, and repurposing of existing medicines as well. But then the access. So it's one thing to develop the medicines, another thing to provide access to them. Can you tell us about some of the challenges in helping improve access to these innovative medicines as well?
So again, from the beginning, so at the nucleus of the rare ecosystem, when Ceradase, which was the first product in Gaucher, came to market or came to approval, we started our humanitarian program. So from the inception, we thought that having universal access is a key part of the rare disease equation. So there is access that is for the developed world, and also for people who cannot access our therapies we created the humanitarian program. And in between, there is a spectrum, because access is not just providing the therapy, but also building an infrastructure that would support the delivery of the therapy. So, and sometimes the humanitarian program was the nucleus to build infrastructure and capabilities at countries around the globe. So we still continue 30 years on to provide access in numerous countries around the world where the probability of commercialization is very slim, and yet we are committed to providing access. Also, the idea of a global initiative with a local implementation is embedded in rare disease, because the patients are few and far apart. So you need all patients to collect evidence. You need all patients to understand the condition. And so obviously you also need to deliver the therapy to all patients who need it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think that's well said, where because it's, sometimes you're dealing with conditions that are 1 in a million, 1 in 500,000, it's truly globally distributed, and you have to be able to get the patients registered in these other countries, and then the access to the medicines for them. So speaking of, which rare diseases Sanofi has focused on, I'm curious, we mentioned lysosomal storage diseases in the intro. How do you decide what rare diseases to invest in, and what criteria are considered when you're weighing those decisions?
So again, we start from our history. So we started with lysosomal storage disorders, and they are a group of disorders around the lysosome. So again, we're talking about the patient as the unit. So now we're talking about the cell, and even an organelle within the cell, which is the lysosome. So the storage disorders of the lysosome result in different multi-organ manifestations. So we started with Gaucher, and then we moved to other lysosomal storage disorders, including Fabry disease, Pompe, and MPS 1. And most recently, acid-sphingomyelinase deficiency. So that is where we start, at the cell and at the lysosome. However, because these diseases have also manifestations or that are different systems, different organs, so we look at adjacency to those disease spaces. So, for example, the lysosome in Pompe disease affects the neuromuscular tissues, or so we have a neuromuscular disorder interest. If in the case of Gaucher or ASMD, it's more on the hematological aspect of the tissues. So it's more about the blood picture, the bone marrow, the spleen, etc. While we find in Fabry, the organs that are affected are more around the renal, so the kidney, or also cardiac organ. So where the symptom arise, that's where potentially the next disease area comes to mind. And so we build organically and opportunistically from adjacencies to where we currently are. And that's part of the larger rock that we're chipping on from our end. I know others are chipping from other sides until we kind of eliminate or address this problem for over 7,000 diseases, rare diseases worldwide.
There has been an exponential increase in the development of targets, and obviously with new tools like AI to identify targets, and then high throughput drug screening, the landscape seems to have shifted and improved in how we develop and deliver drugs. Can you talk to us a bit about some of those emerging trends within the ecosystem, and maybe some of the views that you or Sanofi have on how we can take advantage of those?
So generally, when we move to a new therapeutic area, we would always say we need multiple shots on goal. So looking at different modalities in order to address the unmet need, and sometimes each treatment modality would address part of the unmet need. So yes, the diseases are rare, but they are also very heterogeneous in their manifestation, and certain modalities might address some aspects of the disease better than others. Currently, we're developing, for example, therapies that are small molecules as opposed to biologics, and a working hypothesis that sometimes small molecules would penetrate harder to penetrate tissues like the cardiac muscle or the bones, etc. Also, as you understand the disease more, you also move to the remaining unmet need in the condition. So if the unmet need in the condition, you address the visceral component of the condition, but for example, there is still a remaining neurological aspect of the disease. So you might look for a blood-brain barrier penetrating modality, or so science drives where we go, but also which science meet which unmet need based on the current condition of the patients and the available therapies.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I am curious too. So we've talked a lot about drug development and access. One of the major issues facing rare disease patients is the initial diagnosis. The diagnostic odyssey tends to be, I think the last statistic I saw was 4 to 9 years for a rare disease patient to get the diagnosis. Is there anything that you can comment on as far as what you all have done at Sanofi in terms of shortening or improving the diagnostic odyssey for these rare disease patients?
So again, also from the inception, that was one of the key prerogatives, is to how we make sure that patients who are floating in the system are actually get diagnosed. So that starts with disease awareness and building awareness around the conditions, because they tend to be under the radar for most of the practitioners. It includes, supporting deep expertise in centers of excellence. It includes developing specific testing or easier testing in certain conditions, pioneering simpler approaches like a dry blood spot, for example. It includes digital innovation at this stage, algorithm development in order to try to find the patients who are floating in the system undiagnosed. It also includes building a global infrastructure, or supporting the building of a global infrastructure in testing specialized testing labs and samples that move across the globe for a proper diagnosis. Also includes supporting reference networks, and there is multiple initiatives that's happening independent of us, but we also help facilitate those networks of reference and sharing of knowledge. So again, it's a global village in terms of rare disease, and so we're a catalyst in that village.
No, absolutely. That's great. I think considering the holistic patient journey makes a lot of sense, and that's clearly something you guys have thought about. You've been at Sanofi for 12 years. Obviously, you've mentioned that the first drug in this area was about 30 years ago for lysosomal storage disorders. What are some of the things over the course of your tenure at Sanofi that you're most proud of?
I think our most recent products that we brought to market, olipidase alpha and alpha glucosidase alpha. So I think for me, it's a personal journey, because when I joined the company, these products were in the design phase for their phase 3 study. So kind of being part of the brainstorming, the conversations that we had with authorities across the globe, with health technology assessors, what kind of endpoints, what are the right size, seeing the trials evolve and the challenges we faced during the trials, and then the challenges in interpretation of the data and understanding what the data means, etc., and eventually getting a label. And in the case of olipidase alpha, for example, we had a accelerated approval path across almost across the globe. So it was probably the only product that the company at that time that had Prime, which is the accelerated approval path in Europe. It had Sakigake, which was the accelerated approval path in Japan, and it had also a US accelerated approval from the FDA. So actually the team submitting simultaneous accelerated submissions to multiple global bodies at the same time was something amazing to watch and to be part of. But again, the final thing is that we brought a therapy to market. It was the first therapy to market, and suddenly those patients who've been waiting for 30 years patiently, about 20 years of development in this specific area, now we have a product to serve their unmet needs. So that was kind of from a professional standpoint, it's very fulfilling, and it's very rare. Currently, we tend to move around a lot. So if you end up seeing a story from beginning to end, back to stories, it's something that is have a meaning to it. And so I'm privileged to be part of that story.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it sounds incredibly fulfilling to go through that journey from start to finish. For our audience, again, many of them are current or future healthcare professionals. The landscape of healthcare and medicine is changing, pretty fast. And COVID certainly accelerated some of those trends like telehealth or digital health, retail, getting into medicine. We just had the chief medical officer of Walmart Health and Wellness on the podcast last week, as an example. I'm wondering two things. One is, can you describe kind of your day-to-day role? Like, what does it look like in your role for those who are interested in going into medical affairs or being chief medical officer at life science kind of companies?
Okay, so the day-to-day, there's there's a lot of separate conversations and separate work streams. So you have to be good at multitasking, compartmentalizing, and jumping deep from one topic to the next almost every 30 minutes or every hour. So, but that's a skill you develop with time, that how you could be broad and be deep and also be able to switch channels in your brain fast. There is multiple themes in medical affairs, and we touched upon a lot of them, but you could see the throughout the development continuum of a condition, starting with understanding the natural history, designing the right natural history studies, trying to figure out what could be a potential endpoint for a study, building the relationship with the treater community and understand where existing expertise within the community, and that's for rare diseases is because the expertise could be a cluster in South America or a cluster in Paris or a cluster. So again, being part of a global medical affair function, you pivot across the globe where the expertise is and where the patients are, and sometimes you are the connector between all these expertise. So we actually do have advisory boards as part of our daily activities. And these advisory boards are focused on multiplicity of topics, but that's where you bring experts from across the globe to advise on a specific challenge. You also think a lot, from a patient-centric standpoint about the unmet need and how would you fulfill that unmet need? What kind of evidence do I need to generate? Specifically in rare, we're also fortunate to we have the rare disease registries, which is the largest lysosomal storage disorder real world data set currently in the world. So that in itself creates a lot of opportunities to still understand and evolve our understanding of the conditions that we study. There is a component in medical affairs also, as we mentioned, around diagnostics and around all aspects of the diagnostic endeavor, from pure service delivery to operational aspects, to actually publishing insights and analyzing data. So it's a very fulfilling profession where you could also, if you're interested in strategy, you could practice that, and also being part of a large pharma company, you could also see how you could use the muscles and the reach of the larger organization to kind of fulfill the patient unmet needs. So that's a very unique situation as well, that kind of privileged to be in.
Absolutely. That sounds pretty exciting. A bit daunting for how many hats you have to wear and how many things you could be doing, but also very exciting, especially when, as we mentioned in the last question, you see a drug from start to finish. What advice would you give to our learners about approaching their careers in healthcare, medicine, pharma, etc.?
I would say follow your heart, and sometimes you will be in a place where you're not sure exactly what your story is and how it's going to evolve, but you will realize the meaning in due time. So when you're going through hardship, you keep going, don't give up, and be steadfast. Always remember why you came to this profession, and follow your heart, but also stay the course, and you will it will lead you where you are meant to be led.
It's awesome. Tried and true advice. Thanks for that. And just to be respectful of your time, I only had two other questions. The first is, as you may know, Osmosis is a teaching company, and we like to fill in knowledge gaps. So if you could teach any group of people anything, what would it be and why?
Interesting question. What are the needs of your stakeholders? I would start with that. If I'm designing a curriculum, what are the needs of the audience? So if the need is science based, then definitely I would try to teach more around the rare disease ecosystem in general, and also on our conditions, and raise awareness and use your channel to raise awareness on the diseases. If the need is more around soft skills, and also then I would be happy to also share because they go hand in hand, the heart, the mind, and the soft skills. So I would ask you, what are the needs of your audience? But I'm happy to share anything, and I like to share my experience in any format.
Yeah, no, we could talk for hours about the different audiences, and from our part, we're obviously very interested in trying to fill in the knowledge gaps around rare diseases to get more current and future healthcare professionals and researchers interested in the field, and particularly knowing that rare is actually common. In aggregate, at least 7,000 conditions, as you well know, affect hundreds of millions of people directly, and then their families as well. So it's important work that you all are doing and leading. What else should I have asked you that you'd like to get across to our audience? Anything else top of mind or looking ahead that you're excited about that you'd like to share?
I think maybe emphasize a little bit about the headwinds that we're facing in general around rare diseases, and we got, as I said at the beginning, we got where we are because of certain incentives that were set up in the system, and the thinking that drove this to fruition. So was the incentives mechanisms that were set up in place. And at this stage, I would say there are several headwinds that might make it more and more difficult for rare diseases to continue to be developed. So again, it's still a call to action from all the stakeholders. We still need innovation, and not just in terms of molecule and platform, but innovation in regulatory science, innovation in trial design, innovation in also in health technology assessment with regard to rare disease. So innovation is not just limited to disease modalities, but it's also into thinking and how we can continue to co-create together as partners in the ecosystem, public and private, patients and industry, and all the other stakeholders and decision makers in the system, because that's the only way we could solve for more rare diseases and keep chipping at that block.
That's really, really helpful note to end on, where these challenges could be opportunities for our listeners to get involved and do their part to, as we say, raise the line and strengthen the healthcare system. So with that, Dr. Hamed, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us today, and more importantly, for the work that you and your team are doing to help millions of patients worldwide who suffer from these conditions.
Thank you, Shiv. It's a pleasure to be here.
And with that, I'm Shiv Gaglani. Thank you to our audience for checking out today's show. And remember to do your part to raise the line and strengthen the healthcare system. We're all in this together. Take care.
If you like this podcast, please share it on your social channels. You can also subscribe to the series and check out all of our episodes at osmosis.org/raisethelinepodcast.